call to bring to your attention an essential short-term project that is taking place about costs to running your services. It is being undertaken up and down the country, and it's an important opportunity for our providers to put forward the facts and figures to running a care home or a group of care homes in Bradford district. And this information goes back to the Department of Health and Social Care so that we can truly reflect what's happening in our local market. Data that is provided as part of this exercise will be kept protected, and it will be anonymised. And we will be, I'll be moving shortly on to our guest speaker, and also another colleague as well, from an organisation called ARC. So today we would like to go through what is the iEasy platform that's been selected and being used to facilitate the submissions being made by providers. And Richard, who's joined the call, is a social care advisor from Care England, who will be demonstrating this tool and how to seek technical support. Sorry, I've got a bit of a dry cough. Also, our senior management team has engaged the services of a company called ARC, and ARC has undertaken similar exercises in the past for a number of councils, including some of our neighbouring authorities. So some of our providers may have experience of working with them, and we are joined by John Campbell and his colleagues from ARC. So just before I do ask Richard to start with the demonstration of the iEasy platform, if you have any questions, please can you make best use of the Microsoft Teams chat and also state your name and your organisation. Just before we do move on to Richard, is there any questions? I think everybody's taken that message on board. You are going easy on me. That's fantastic. Right. OK, Richard, over to you, if that's OK.
Thank you very much. Well, yes, I'm Richard Ayres. I'm a social care advisor to Care England. I'm formerly a provider working for one of the larger providers, and I've been sort of seconded over to the Care Provider Alliance, which is the Care Associations Alliance of Care Associations, and they represent between them about 50–60% of providers plus for care homes and home care. And my role is really just to kind of support the implementation and engagement of providers in the fair cost of care exercise. And we at the Care Provider Alliance have been asked by the Department of Health and Social Care to support provider engagement, because we at the CPA have been arguing for many, many years now, probably 8 to 10 years, that we need more money injected into the sector ever since we've had austerity imposed upon us. And we've been arguing and fighting and kicking and screaming about how desperate we need money into the sector. And sometimes you have to be a little bit careful what you wish for, because we get an exercise like this put upon us at quite a challenging time. It is a really good opportunity. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, once-in-a-generation opportunity for most of us to provide some very, very important data back to government, for government to be able to take note of and hopefully inject some more funding into the sector. Now, they have injected 1.362 billion already into the sector over the next 3 years to help fund this process. And I'm going to use my hands here because it's the easiest way to do it. But we have our self-funder fees here offering a cross-subsidisation to local authority fees, which are sort of generally lower, pretty much always lower than the self-funder fees. And the fair cost of care exercise is designed nationally to understand at a local level what the fair cost of care is. And the fair cost of care is broadly the sort of the midpoint, the break-even sort of point, that if everyone was paid that rate, all of your residents were paid at that rate, you would be no worse off than you are today with cross-subsidisation of self-funders and local authority funded residents. And the fair cost of care is a rate that the local authorities cannot afford to fund, okay? It's based on your cost, the average cost or the median cost of providing care in your organisation. And the local authorities are tasked with moving towards the fair cost of care over the next 3 years as much as possible. Okay, it's a 10-year project, but over the next 3 years, we've been given funding to try and move as close to fair cost of care as possible. But we've identified that there's a gap here between what the local authority will be given to move towards the fair cost of care and what the fair cost of care is. And it's that gap that if we don't close it, it's going to be borne by you, the providers. Now, Section 18.3 of the Care Act means that these self-funders over here will be able to exercise their rights to be placed under brokerage via the local authority from October 23. So anyone new coming into care from October 23 will be placed, potentially if they ask the local authority to do it, at the local authority brokered rate. And that's the rate the local authority can buy care for, which is going to be lower, possibly, than the fair cost of care is at the moment. So we've got this gap. So we're going to start to lose that self-funded cross-subsidy. It's going to get smaller and smaller. Now, we've a lot of people say, well, why do I participate in this process? We've done these for years. We never get the money. The council never pass it on. They're really, really mean to us. We never get what we ask for. And all I can say is put any of those preconceived ideas out of your head, because this is an exercise like no other exercise before. This is an exercise that has been given government funding to fund the local authorities to be able to move closer towards the fair cost of care, because they are naturally going to erode that self-funded cross-subsidy. That is going to disappear, maybe not totally, but it will disappear quite significantly at some point over the next couple of years. And that's why local authorities recognise they need to pay more, and they will be paying more. But they're not just going to pay more unless you tell them what the cost of care is. Now, some people say, well, I don't really believe central government are going to fund this. Why would I believe it? They never follow through on what they say. And all I can say in that regard is, and I come from a provider's perspective, and I've spent 10 years challenging local authorities for more money when they've got less money to give. So I'm not always the best advocate for government. But what I will say is they made a change earlier this week, back end of last week, on Section 18.3 of the Care Act, because these self-funders over here, as of October 23, all your existing self-funders could have gone over to the local authority. And the government said, listen, you've told us that's a problem, providers. You've told us that's a problem, care provider associations and local authorities. You've told us that will cripple us overnight, okay? The Department of Health and Social Care have listened to that, and they said, well, look, we'll leave the existing self-funders where they are. We know they've got a kind of a natural attrition of 18 months to 2 years, sadly, but they don't stay with us for a huge amount of time. And coincidentally, that move for existing self-funders has been put off for sort of 12 to 18 months, more likely 18 months. So what we're going to see, the main impact on us over the next, or from October 23, is the new self-funders coming in at the local authority rates. So we've got a bit of time between now and October 23 to grow that local authority rate to get far closer to the fair cost of care. We can only do that if you participate in this process. And that's whether you're a home care provider or a care home provider. So we're going to talk about the care home tool now, and I'm going to give you a quick demo of it. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I'm going to point out some of the key points you need to consider. And my colleague John, who I work with quite a bit on lots of projects, I'm sure he will chip in if I say anything that doesn't quite add up, or if you're going to do anything slightly differently locally. But I just want you to be assured it's a government-led initiative. Don't beat up the local authority on that. That's my job, okay? They're doing the very best they can do with the pot of money that they've got, but they can only do it if you participate. Now, what I am doing is just dropping something into the chat for you, and that's a link to the tool itself, some really good helpful guidance, some support materials and videos, and you're free to, the chat's always available after. You can log back into Teams and pick that up from the chat. There's also a link there to the LGA website and the LGA FAQs that were put out recently. They're aimed towards local authorities, but they help providers understand the approach the local authority is going to take, because the local authorities are also rabbit in headlights on this initiative as well, because it's been imposed upon them. And the last one, there's a link to my email address. If you've got any questions afterwards, then I'm sure John's going to drop his email address in there. The local authority will give you lots of different contact details. But if you want to speak to someone in confidence, or you want to ask a question, you're more than welcome to come to me at my email address, and I'll very happily pick that up for you. So and I will treat that in confidence as well. No question is a silly question. I won't be able to see if hands go up. So Raminda or John, just interrupt me if anybody wants me to stop and talk about something a little bit more. So I shall share my screen now because I've rambled for far too long. Here we go. You get to see yourselves for a minute. Is that working? Come on, computer. There we go. Right. Don't need my emails. Right. So here we go. So this is once you've registered on the tool, I'll move Raminda out of the way. Once you've registered on the tool, again, the link I've sent you or the link you've received from the local authority or from John at ARC, you will be given access, an email address and a password access for the system. Once you log into the system, I'm on a test system. It's a dummy system with lots of dummy data. And I will just warn you, the test system is working slowly today because there's a lot of people on it. But this is only the test system. It's not consistent with what you should be seeing. So you'll see instantly that I've got 40 care homes in mind, and that's because I'm in a dummy system with lots of dummy data, and I'm showing lots of different people how to do things, whether you've got one or multiple care homes. So let's assume if you've only got one care home within your group, you will only see a one here. If you've got multiple care homes, you will see multiple care homes here. I'll come on to this in a second, but as well as the out of area side, but I'm going to just take you straight away to this little a question mark in the bottom left-hand corner. If you click on that, it brings up a lovely, helpful little bot. We all love those. And it'll give you a little to-do list, things that you need to do, okay? It will also give you lots of little help information, which you can click on, lots of user guides, Excel sort of templates for you to look over, and a guided tour. Very helpful if you've never been in the system before. And there's also some videos if you prefer not to listen to my voice and you want to listen to someone else who's equally as annoying as me. There's also a little help and support function over here on the left-hand side, which has got PDF versions of lots of those documents. I'm not going to go through them, but they're there for you to use if you've got any questions, concerns or issues. I'm going to come into the My Organisation page here, which will just give you some information about your organisation. You don't need to worry too much about that, but if you are a charity, you just need to pop yourself down here and just register that you are a charity. Okay. The main section here is your profile. So when you set yourself up, you will become what's called a primary user. And as a primary user, you can share your details with the local authority by clicking on the boxes down here. And you can also set up sub-users if you want to set someone up. I don't have the right to set up a sub-user because I'm only in a demo system, but you will have the ability to set up sub-users if you need to do so. There's a little save button in the bottom if you need to. You can also change your password if that helps. We've also got a little section over here, which is your reports and data extracts. There's only one report in here at the moment. There will be more added, but this is when you've completed everything, you can click on this and it will give you an export of the summary tab. I'll show you that a little bit later. You've also got the sections over here, which I'm going to come through in a moment, but I'm going to take you initially back to the dashboard. You can customize your dashboard over here, but I'm not going to go through that at the moment. What you will see when I expand this section is you've got not started, drafts, submitted, queried, etc., etc. They represent these buttons over here, okay? So the first one is the number of care homes, so the not started will be in this button here. Once you've started them, they're going to be in draft, they'll move over to this button, and when you've submitted them, they'll move over to submitted. When the local authority sends them back to you, which I'm sure they will on some occasions, asking you with some queries, they might send you some questions that you need to answer over here. You've then got, once the local authority and you have agreed that all questions have been answered, the local authority will mark them approved. You'll be able to access the approved ones down here. The last section over here is once they are approved, you may be working with leads for example. Leads may fund some residents in your care home and they may say to you, we understand that you validated and verified your response with Bradford Council. We also place some residents with you. Could we see your data, please? And you and only you will be able to give them permission to see your data. If you don't want them to see your data, you do not have to give them access to it. You're under absolutely no obligation whatsoever to do that. But we do suggest you share your information if you can, because it will help other authorities working out of area. I'm going to go into the draft section here, okay, and this is where I've got some pending cost of care exercises. I need to mute that person just come in, Raminda. What you see over here is that I am, my dummy care home is Dummy Yellow House. I am Rainbow Care Limited. My dummy local authority is Local Authority East, and my local authority has registered. And for some of them, you'll see the local authority has provided a date by which your response needs to be responded by. Raminda, would you be able to just go in and mute the person who just joined, because it's a bit of background noise? Thank you. What you can do is you can click on any of these here, one of them or two of them, and you can start to download. So here I can download two of two locations by clicking the download tool. I'm only going to download one here, and I'm going to download that one. It'll drop it down here for me, and if I click on it and just click on the yes button, it will open up as if by magic into a spreadsheet. And if I prefer to work in a spreadsheet, or I want to print this spreadsheet off while I go and get all of the data, and then handwrite it in and populate it later on, I can do that, whatever your preference is. Sometimes larger groups or people with multiple care homes find the spreadsheets easier to manage. Once you've got that, you can save it to a personal location, go back to your dashboard, where you can also download your locations, and you can click the import button here, and you can import it back by selecting the file, again here, and pressing import. Okay, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to mess up the data I've got in there. So I'll go back to my drafts and I'm going to open this draft here. Because I've started work on this, you'll see I've got some rates that are published in here. So this is going to be my lowest rate and this is going to be my highest rate. So this should be residential and this should be something along the range of nursing, nursing dementia, nursing enhanced care. So I'm going to click on open, and as I do that, you will see 7 tabs appear. The 7th tab is a summary, so you've only got 6 tabs of data to complete. The first tab has got a blued out section with my care home data in it. It's taken from the CQC website. If you need to look at the CQC website, you can do that. What I will just show you here is, and I've asked them to change this several times, they still haven't changed it. You'll see as you pop onto each of these fields, there's lots of little pop-up boxes that are created, which give you instructions on what to put in each of these fields. You will see mine are already completed, and I'm leaving them as completed because I've already started working. It's slightly easier and quicker for me to do the presentation. This says this is your home CQC registered occupancy. It's your registered capacity, not your occupancy. So that I've asked for that to be changed. It should be changed by the time you log in, hopefully. But this is what the CQC recognise you as your home as having and being registered for. This is not the amount of beds that you've got for sale. This is what the CQC believes you are registered for. It may include double occupancy. It's really important you remember this number because I will come back to that in a moment. So on tab 1, 35 is my registered CQC capacity, as it says very clearly there. The registration detail is whether I am a nursing home. Now it says a residential home, and they call residential without nursing, which annoys me slightly, but that's what they call it. So a care without nursing is residential. You've got nursing and residential here, and you've got nursing. Select which one you are. I've selected both for now. It will ask you if you are part of a PFI contract or not. If you are, just select yes. If you don't know if you're part of a PFI contract, then answer. Whoops. Yeah, please answer no if you don't know what a PFI is, because you are not part of a PFI if you don't know you're part of a PFI. It will ask you if your care home is predominantly for older people's care. We know a lot of homes are dual registered. If you've got 50% or more of your residents are over the age of 65, then you may proceed and answer yes. If you've got 50% or more of your residents under the age of 65, I suggest you have a conversation with the local authority. If you're providing services to those with learning disabilities, I suspect I would require you to speak to your local authority because it's unlikely that you will be in scope for funding as a result of this exercise, unless the local authority is doing something unique, which some of them are, by the way. We're going to ask you if your home was closed at any point during the 1st of April 21 to the 31st of March 22. If it was closed to admissions, answer yes. If you answer no, these columns will disappear. If you answer yes, it will say, could you tell me approximately how many beds, how many days you were closed for? In this case, we're going to say 49, and then we're going to put a little note in here and say 24 of them were due to COVID and 25 of them were because we had an embargo on the health trust. Okay. If there's anything else you want to tell us about your care home, then please pop a note in here, but please use this conservatively because it does mean the local authority has got to read everything. Only put notes in here if it's helpful to the local authority. The next tab is the expenditure tab, and this asks you for evidence of information from the 1st of April 22 to the 31st of March, 1st of April 21 to the 31st of March 2022, and it will offer you the opportunity to update that information from April 22. If you want to provide information from April 22, you answer yes. If you answer no, and I'm not going to do that because it will remove all of my data. If you answer no, then the local authority will come to you and say, are you telling me none of your costs have increased since April? And I can pretty much guarantee that the vast majority of your costs will have increased beyond this period, April 21 to March 22, unless of course you had a crystal ball and you predicted all of this mass inflation we were going to have. So here you'll put in your data from the 1st of April to the 31st of March. You'll populate it. It's all dummy data, so just ignore the fact that these numbers are nice and even because yours won't be anywhere near like that. If you click on the little question marks, you will see some helpful tips and hints of what needs to be included in here. So this is your registered nursing costs. This is every cost you have ever incurred about a nurse during that period of time, okay? So it's their pay, it's their benefits, it's their on costs, it's their holiday, their sickness, any other costs related to their pension schemes, their agency costs, their agency margin, and any unrecovered agency VAT. It is the full cost incurred by your organisation for anything to do with a nurse. You will put that cost in there. In this case, I'm having £100,000, and I'm saying that those costs have increased from April 22 by 4.5%. That then changes the actual total from £100,000 to £104,500. That is the cost from April 22 for the cost base. Really important you provide this information, otherwise the local authority has got to work off of this data and it's going to grossly understate your care. It's the same for nursing assistants. Nursing assistants here, there's a description of what they are. If you recruit agency, you need to include those. Helpful tips and hints on what you put in, the same for senior carers and the same for carers. You'll put in your cost and you'll put in your inflation. We've put in a national living wage type of inflation because that is what we believe that they will probably track. Some of you may have paid more than the national living wage. You may have gone up to the real living wage or the London living wage in Bradford, but you may have gone up and paid slight enhancements. You as a provider may just be choosing to pay more because you're competing with Audi down the road that pays £11 an hour, in which case you need to pay higher rates, and you put your level of inflation here over what you incurred last year. It'll give you some nice higher totals over here. OTs and PTs you'll pop in here. Most people will leave these blank unless, of course, you've got some kind of reablement facility. Obviously, if you buy these services in and you pay an invoice, you will put those costs in here. Activities coordinators, registered managers, deputies, and other will also go in here. Previously, I've implied to people, if you're not comfortable putting your salary in here, then to pop it in other and give us a note to explain down below what that is. I'm going to change that and say, please don't be shy about putting your salaries in here, because it's really, really important the way in which this information is transacted and shared back with the Department of Health and Social Care in Annex A, that they will take the median of these values and apply them overall. So it's really, really important you put those costs in here. If for any reason your manager is paid by a dividend, you will need to put a little note down here to say that they're paid via a dividend, and that you allow for that within the return on operations on the next tab. I'm just going to delete that comment because I don't agree that I put that anymore. The next section is the other staff costs. So this is things like your reception admin, chefs and cooks, domestic cleaning, maintenance and gardening, and any other that we've excluded. If you put anything in other, please pop a note down here, because otherwise it will be excluded, because it needs to mean something. If you've used external sources, maybe you have invoices for gardening and invoices for maintenance operatives, then you'll populate those in there. If not, you'll use their full-time salaries. Chefs and cooks have been extrapolated from the kitchen staff because chefs and cooks are probably paid a slightly higher rate, in which case they may have a different level of inflation. Cleaning, laundry and kitchen staff probably paid closer to the national living wage. The next section is the section you'll all be very familiar with. This is the cost of running. Oh, yes, yes.
Sorry to break you off. We've had a couple of questions just on the staffing figures in the chat. Info, sorry, I don't know who Info is, but Info has put, we only have figures for total staff. Can we use that without breaking it down? And Louise, New Line Care Home, has put, I was going to ask the same thing.
An interesting point. I mean, if you physically can't break it down, you have to put it in other, okay? But the local authority is going to have to come back to you and say, well, what the hell does that mean? Okay, it's going to be really challenging to put it in other, and it may mean that the local authority can't necessarily use all of your costs to come up with a median. However, it will still give you the correct total. So they can use the median total value, but they won't be able to use your individual cost breakdowns in what they present back to the Department of Health and Social Care. So I would say your payroll files should tell you what the breakdown of staff is. I'd be very surprised if you couldn't provide that, but you know your systems better than I do. If you can't do it, bundle it into other and explain why you've done that. And I'll leave that up to the local authority on how they present that information back to the Department of Health and Social Care, because they will need to report median values on a line-by-line basis. But overall, they will still only report the total aggregate of all of those as the total sum. So the local authority will have to do some manipulation. So just make sure you tell the local authority that's what you've done. I've done 55 of these presentations. That's the first time that question's ever come up, and 2 of you have asked it on the same call. So it's not a question I had a stock answer for, I'm afraid. But it doesn't mean that you will be excluded from participating. It just means the local authority has got to do some magic to be able to use your numbers. Is that okay to move on?
Yeah. Raminda, can I just come in
hand
there
up.
briefly, if you
Yeah.
don't mind? Just to say, just to providers, I completely agree that actually it's sometimes really difficult to strip those out, particularly if you've got staff that actually sometimes do multiple roles as well, which can often happen. It's sometimes hard to get that exact breakdown, but where you may be not able to, for instance, separate out some roles, you will be able to separate others out. You know, your registered manager, you can identify that separately, I'm sure. Your chefs probably separately. So, you know, where you can separate it and put it in and then give a note later on to say that that's the case. Because I completely agree. For some, it is quite difficult to pull and extract all that information. But if you've got any queries around this, the best thing is to just flag that with sort of the local authority and ARC, just so that they can then just understand that and then just help you and support you to put that information in an appropriate way.
Fabulous, thank you, Louise. So I'm going to move on to the care home supplies and services. And actually, John, I'll just talk to you offline about that afterwards, because I can give you, I've had a conversation with the DH today on exactly that point. So on care home supplies and services costs, these are the general costs that you will incur via an invoice for your organisation. So these are going to be things like your food supplies. So you'll put down your annual costs again from April 21 to March 22, and you'll put your food inflation costs down there. Now, we know that's tracking between sort of 9 and 10% currently, so it gives us an uplift of £4,500 on what the value we put in there. The same from our domestic and cleaning supplies, again, applying inflation. Medical supplies excluding PPE, again, I'll just draw you here to a little comment, please exclude PPE here. This might be your continence products that would include here. If you receive any income from your CCG, or what was the CCG for continence aids, then please make sure you put the net number down here, not the gross number. We're not interested in any revenue. We're only interested in what your net costs are in this exercise. Again, if you know inflation, pop it in. If you don't know inflation, you're equally able to leave that out. Thank you very much. One of my children just brought me a drink, so I'm thirsty. The next section is PPE. Now, this will probably challenge some providers, because PPE was pre-issued in the period April 21 to the 31st of March 22. So we're asking you to do a little bit of a fudge here. You can do one of two things. You can leave it blank and come down here and put a little note down to the local authority, say, please, can you calculate my PPE? I would prefer you didn't do that, because that's a lot of work for the local authority and it might get missed. What I will say is that since free PPE stopped, you probably have purchased some over April, May, June, or even July. So you may have some invoices. You should have an idea of roughly how many masks, gloves and things that you are using. And if not, you can pretty easily look at the volume that you're using and go online and find a price for those. So you should be able to come up with what an annualized number is there. But please don't apply inflation to it if you're fudging the number. Now, if you are fudging the number here, please put a note down the bottom to explain what you've done to the local authority, so that they know and they can make reference to that. I can see Louise looking. Are you okay with that, Louise, or did you want to say something?
Just wanted to say that free PPE still continued, just in case anybody starts panicking, till March 23. So you won't be paying anything just yet, and we can certainly pull together some figures roughly if people need it, if that helps. If you just can put the quantities in, or if you want to ask me, and we can just maybe share something around sort of what we'd expect to be paying for masks, gloves, etc., what the kind of market value is at that time. We could probably do some investigation work for that.
Okay, well, if it was free to you and you didn't pay for it and you're still not paying for it, then you can put the zero. There's no cost to you. If maybe you were doing shoe overs or hand sanitizer, you might want to put some of those costs in there. The rest of these are pretty self-explanatory, but I'll just cover off a few big ones. Insurance, £50,000 a year. It's gone up by a significant percentage. Let's say it's gone up by 50%, but it's gone up to £75,000 over here. If you haven't had your renewal yet, you can put that in as zero and leave it blank, and just pop a note down here saying our insurance renews in August 2022, and the local authority will be able to assume what that inflation is for you based on other providers' responses. The same for your energy, gas, oil, electricity, etc. Let's just assume it was £50,000. Electricity went up by 100%, it will double it over here. If gas has gone up by 150%, it will put it in here. If you haven't had your renewals in April, then leave those as blank. However, if you have had your renewals and you've only fixed it up until October 22, then you may put a little note down the bottom saying our energy is increasing in October, no renewal, spelled incorrectly there, no renewal yet, okay? And that way the local authority will know that they need to apply inflation for you from October 23. The next one over here I just want to draw your attention to is things like telephone and internet. Some of you put telephone lines into residents' rooms, but if you charge a resident for that line rental, please don't include that cost in here. If you recover cost, it's a net cost you put in here, not a gross cost. Again, if you put anything into the other section, please make sure you add comments in to validate what you've done. Next section here is your care home premises cost. Again, you can click on the little buttons here to give you some information to help you fill this out. If you've got large expenditure items that you capitalise in here, let's say, for example, you built a little conservatory for £20,000 on the back of your care home and you're depreciating that over 10 years, you will recover that under the return on capital section. You will not include it here. Anything you depreciate or over a 12-month period or you include in your costs here, this is where you will put those costs. So you've got your fixtures and fittings, things that are sort of glued to the wall, stuck to the wall, etc. Repairs and maintenance charges, someone came in to fix that leaking shower or repair a toilet. Furniture, fixtures, fittings, maybe chairs that are sort of lower value, some ad hoc small carpets. Anything you don't capitalise will go into this section. Anything not covered, please put into other and put a note in here to explain what you've done. If you know inflation, pop it in. If you don't know inflation, unlikely for a lot of these items, then leave it out because they were just pure costs. The next section is your head office cost section. It's a very misleading heading because everybody will have costs in this section. Now, I'm going to take you straight to this button here. It says here, if you've left all of these blank, please tick yes to tell us those costs are incurred elsewhere. I'm going to ask you all to answer no to this question because there should be nobody who doesn't incur costs in these middle two boxes, and I'll talk you through those in a minute. If anyone's answered yes here, I'll be asking ARC or the local authority to contact you wherever you put some of these critical costs. So first of all, we've got our central regional management overhead costs. So it may be if you've got a franchise or you're a part of a group, you may have some central costs that you incur, in which case there may be a percentage uplift that's been provisioned for April 22. You'll drop those costs in there. Even if you're an independent provider, just a one-off independent care home, you're definitely going to recruit an accountant to sign off your account, so you will have a finance cost. You may have recruited staff from the local newspaper or advertised for residents in the local newspaper. You may have employed a solicitor. You may have had some HR costs here. If you have, you'll populate those in there. I defy anyone to leave that blank. The next section, DBS section, training and recruitment, temp to perm fees, training costs you don't receive from the council alone. Any vetting and DBS charges must go into this section here. Again, you will all have at least some cost in this section. Again, anything missing, Rowenda, could you please put whoever they?
Yeah, done.
Thank you. The other head office costs, please populate in there and just make sure you put a note in the bottom to tell us what you've done. And I'm just going to draw to your attention here. What that does is gives us a total of £1.29 million for 21-22 and £1.5 million for April 22. Totally made up data, so please don't think those numbers are anything sensible. It's just illustrative. These numbers will become important for the next section. What I'm just going to do is quickly take you back to, no, I'm not. I'll just go on to return on capital.
We've just got a hand up, Richard.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, it's Louise. Just really briefly, because obviously a lot of providers are incurring costs from electronic care planning systems and such and things like that. It's obviously that they would need to go in there. I'm guessing in the head office cost section, is it?
Well, if you've got a head office, then you will populate them in the head office. They come through to you as a recharge. You could put any other costs in other, but if you go up here, I thought there was an IT section. There clearly isn't an IT section, but yeah. So any of those other costs that aren't listed, you need to put into the other section, but just put a note to explain what they are. Yeah,
just to remind us, obviously everybody's got lots of maintenance contracts, service contracts separately, and then you've got the ECM, all the care management systems and such. So there's lots of additional costs that way, isn't there, that we need to make sure are included.
Well, your maintenance and gardening is covered up here, so this will be invoice costs, but obviously it's not the actual items, it's just the salary, the pay. Okay,
I'm thinking more maintenance. People have service contracts, for instance, for their call systems. You'll have a service contract for your fire alarm. There's all those type of service contracts that need to be included as well, that people need to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. The cost that you get to at the bottom here should be a number you identify with as being consistent with what it costs to run your home. So this should evidence the operational cost of running your home. So what is not listed specifically, you need to drop into one of the other boxes and tell us what it is you drop in here. I'll move up to return on operations and return on capital. It's very, very important that providers provide both a return on operations and a return on capital. Now, this section here will use the expenditure data to give you a number, to give you a total. So if you put in here a figure of 10%, what you will see is the 1.29 million goes to 129,000, and for April 22 it's 150,000 pounds. So you'll need to look at that percentage and to confirm for yourselves, is that sufficient money to cover my return on operations? Now that is your pre-tax profit, your pre-tax surplus, or what you would put into your prudent reserve. So you'll need to pay your taxes out of that. You may need to pay dividends out of that. There may be some other costs you need to pay out of that. And it's really very, very important that you make sure that percentage reflects here a number based on your operational costs that you want. It's not necessarily the markup applied to all of your operational costs, but you need to make sure you put the right percentage in there to reflect the number that you need down here, okay? Because that is your profit and your surplus before tax and before paying your dividends.
Richard, we've got a hand up from David Crabtree.
Okay. Hi, Richard. So far, so good. Pretty bog standard. Follow the accounts, put the figures in. Now we get to the complicated area. You've put 10% into whatever it is, return on operation.
Yeah.
Where would we grab that figure from?
Right. So let me. Okay. So I think it might become clear when I talk about return on capital in a minute. But let me just do return on capital for you, and then I'm going to come back to that. Because
right. Can I just stop you there again? Right. If I start to talk about paranoid schizophrenia or the differentials in dementia and this, that, and the other, then fine. But as soon as you start to let's talk about returns on operations or returns on capital, we're into financial dialogue that the vast percentage of us don't deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. I'm going to come on to it. If I can explain return on capital, then it'll hopefully become clear what goes into each of these buckets. But I'm going to answer your question. I just don't want to jump because I can't explain one without explaining the other. And I haven't told you about return on capital, but just give me 2 minutes and I will come back. I'll make sure I'll come back and check that I've answered what you've asked me to answer, David. You can provide return on operations as well as a total value. So if you believe that your costs, and these are costs of things like your dividend that you pay to your directors, it will be your taxes, it could be that you've got to make a prudent reserve to build that conservatory next year. It may be that you have a reserves policy that you've got to accrue some money for. It may be that you know you need to make 4 or 5% because you are the owner of the business or your owners of the business need to make a certain amount of money. If you added all of those costs up and say it was £200,000, for example, I'll just do that on my calculator because I can't do this in my head. £200,000 is what we need to make in our business to cover all of our costs and and generate a profit. We will then divide that by the number of occupied beds. In this case, I'm going to say 30, and then I'll divide that by 52. That would then give me a figure of £128 in here. Okay, so that's what I would need to cover those costs and generate the return I need. For next year, maybe some things are changing. Maybe it's £130 that I need. So that will cover all things that are listed here. So it's our dividends, it's our pre-tax number. So we've got to pay our taxes out of it, our corporation tax and what have you. We've got to have money for our reserves. We've got to make sure if we've got any future investments coming up that we're collecting enough money over the next few years to cover those. And it's also got to deliver us some money to keep in our back pockets or to have a prudent reserve for the future. The next section is return on capital, which is actually a legitimate business cost. So return on capital is anything related to funding. Okay, so this could be your mortgages, your loans, your borrowing, your capex. So when you built that conservatory and you're depreciating it, that's going to have your depreciation. It may be capital equipment that you've expended that you need to recover a return on capital on. It could be that you've paid off all of your borrowings and you own your business outright, in which case, if your business was valued at a certain amount, you're entitled to an income from that because you could remove all of your cash in that business and invest it in a pension fund or on the stock market and get a return on that value. Okay, you also have money tied up in your cash flow because local authorities tend to pay on 45, 60 or even longer, as do some CCGs. You could be waiting months for your money. So you've got money tied up in cash flow that you need an income on. This is not a profit line. This is what you're entitled to recover to cover the cash side, the capital cost of your business. So it does this in two ways. Ask you if your property is rented, yes or no. And we're going to assume yes for this instance. Let's assume it's rented and our rent is £100,000 per annum. It will ask us or tell us that we can only provide that at per resident week value. So that would be £100,000 divided by 30 residents, because that's what's occupied, divided by 52 weeks a year. It will give us a number here. However, we've also got other money tied up in our business beyond rent. We've got cash flow. We've got the capex that we've talked about. So we'll need to understand what those costs are. Let's say they're £200,000. £200,000 divided by 30 occupied beds, divided by 52 weeks a year, coincidentally is the same as above. So it's £128. And next year, we might say it's a little bit more, £135. So that's what, now that's if your property was rented. Now, if your property was not rented and say it was owned or mortgaged, you will answer no there. And it might say, have you got a recent valuation for your property? If you've got a valuation in the last 3 years, you can populate it in here. If not, then leave it blank. Let's assume we have got a valuation. We'll say our property is worth £1 million. If we put a number in here, I'm doing 10%, because it's a nice, easy number to play with. Whoops. If I put in a 10% number here, what's that saying? Have I done something wrong? What about, also, oh, that's the year of valuation. Sorry, we'll put in the year of valuation 2020. If we have got it valued, it'll ask you if it's a RICS valuation or not. That's a yes or no question. If you don't know, answer no. But if it was a valuation based on you borrowing money or taking money out, or a financial evaluation, it will be a RICS valuation. It will then ask if you want to provide that as a percentage value of the home. I'm going to pop 10% in here. 10% of £1 million is £100,000. That will tell me what my return on capital is for the year. Now, as I said to you a moment ago under the rented example, maybe I need more than that, because that only calculates it based on the value of the home. Maybe I've got other capital costs that I need to recover. But I may wish to do that as a percentage value of the home. Now, if I'm doing it as a percentage value of the home, I need to add up what all those capital costs are. How much does it cost me to have that cash flow tied up in the business because the local authorities and CCGs paid me so late? Maybe I've got factoring costs. Maybe I've got some capex costs. Maybe I've got a loan or some borrowing or a mortgage. We need to add up all those costs. Let's say they're £200,000 a year. I'm going to take £200,000 a year, divide that number by the occupied beds, in this case 30, divide it by 52 again, and I'm going to get to my number of 128. Okay. Likewise over here, I may know for next year that interest rates are going up for me because one of my bank loans is changing. It might be £140, but that's how we would calculate return on capital and return on operations. So now I'll just come back to David to ask if that helps in any way.
Yeah, and David's just put a question in the chat in terms of, again, I think it relates to the beds. So is that divided by registered number of beds or occupancy, as you were coming up with, as you were looking at the return on capital there, Richard?
The tool does all of this based on your average occupancy, because the vast majority of these costs are going to be based on occupancy, not your capacity. Okay, so it will be based.
Where did it ask us the occupancy?
We haven't got to that bit yet. Coming on to that.
Right, good. Right. With all due respect, Richard, and I'm not, you know, I'm not completely thick, but most of that was in Mandarin. It's not your fault. It's what you're couched in, and it's your background. Our background is not that. And this is where everybody will just draw a blank. It's like a kid at school. Once you start using terminology and stuff that's outside our remit, we pretend that we'll just go away. We won't fill it in. You won't get these returns. This is my big plea, and it was my big plea right along. We should have working seminars in rooms with people demonstrating on laptops or iPads how we do this. I've employed my accountant to, but the meeting was changed, so she can't attend today, but she's going to watch the playback. She will not be able to. I don't know what my return on capital should be, and she as an accountant won't be able to tell me because that's not her job. Then I have to go to my administrator and say, let's look at the payroll and break that down into sections to do the first section. Now, one of our colleagues, an international auditor by acclaim and profession, took 5 hours to fill this in. You can see the problem we have. It's the language it's couched in, and we're skipping through it on an hour seminar that will not, it hasn't attracted the numbers even today that should be here. We have 104 care homes or providers, and they're not present.
I think just to come in on that one, David, it's something that I can flag with the senior management team in terms of support to the provider sector to try and get these completed, see if there is anything else we can do. I mean, the 1 hour session isn't designed as a whistle stop tour, but it is primarily to provide that technical support in terms of how the tool works.
I agree, and I'm not knocking it for knocking's sake.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is we have 10 working days.
Yeah,
it's an impossibility. You
Yeah.
won't get the returns.
And I think that's something that is has been taken into full consideration. I think it's the tight timescales that we're up against in terms of working backwards from meeting the Department of Health and Social Care deadline, in terms of pulling together the analytics and the report that needs to go in. And I think it's trying to achieve a lot, I appreciate, within a very short timescale and in the run up to the summer holidays as well, as you prepare in operational.
Bradford is unique, as you know.
Yeah.
Of the 100 providers, 50% have less than 29 bedded care homes and are sole providers and do all their own books and then just hand it over to the accountant at the end of the year and say, tell me how much tax I've got to pay.
Yeah.
And I'm going to, if I can get back to this, I just would like to explain. I mean, most accountants will be able to tell you what your return on capital is based on what your books say. So if your accountant who signs off your accounts is accessing this, they should be able to tell you what your return on capital is. I'll give you an idea. The return on capital will be anywhere, I would imagine, from 5 to 15%. Your return on profit will also be anywhere between 5 and 15%. The aggregate of the two will be something probably along the lines of 15%. Now, I can see that's frustrating you. What I will say, this is the only area of all of the cost the local authority will have free license to interpret itself. Okay, so what you put in here is helpful. It is not, doesn't have to be the most accurate number. Okay, you do your best to provide what you can. Okay, and John's job at ARC and the local authority's job will be to validate that with you if your numbers look completely out of kilter, and that's absolutely fine. Okay.
Just on that point, we have been asking for 6-7 years now of the local authority to give us a figure that they would assume would be correct on return on capital or whatever it is.
No one can give you a figure for return on capital because it's unique to your organisation. Only you can say what your return on capital is. No one can tell you what it is apart from you and your accountant, because it's legitimate business cost to you. The only one who can say can give you is potentially your profit, but they need to know, do you pay your staff by dividend and what your taxation issues are. So even then on their own, they need some guidance from you. Okay. What I've dropped in the chat some information on return on operations and return on capital for you. And I've also dropped in some really detailed sessions where you can get a lot more information. I absolutely advocate you to attend these sessions. I'm sure the authority has sent them out to you. They're fantastic. Sharif does those and he's amazing.
I attended one yesterday and the same questions were present. Most care home owners are drawing a blank veil over these questions.
Yeah, out of the 50 or so that I've done, yesterday was unique in terms of what came up around return on capital and return on operations. That was unique. Okay, it's definitely an issue, definitely a concern, but the volatility that came out around return on capital and return on operations was unique to yesterday's session only.
That's probably because you were dealing with Northerners, Richard.
Well, I've done them all across the country, but I don't know how much longer I've got left, so I'm going to rattle on if that's okay. So at the bottom of return on capital, you've got some additional comments here, which just ask, is your home converted purpose built? When it was converted or purpose built, it helps the guys to understand exactly how efficient your home is run. A 1956 purpose built care home is far less efficient than a purpose built care home in 2020. Okay, it will ask you to define the number of en suites, wet rooms and communal bathrooms, and if you know your square meters, it'll be great for you to populate that in. These don't do anything other than offer a bit of information to the local authority. The next section is your occupancy. So this is where, on the first tab, you remember I talked about 35 registered beds. This is where occupancy becomes important. So we're asking for your data for the period 21-22 and also for April 22. It's the same information, so I'll just go through April 21 to 22. It's asking how many beds you had available for sale. In this instance, we're saying we only had 30 beds available for sale, 5 beds were out of commission, and those 30 beds that we had, out of those 30 beds, we had 4 in resi, 5 in dementia, 7 in nursing, and 8 in nursing dementia. It showed we had 24 occupied and we had 6 vacant. Okay. Likewise, if I over here, if I just put that to 10, it would say I've got 30 active beds and it would show me as being fully occupied, which is obviously very rarely the case. It'll ask you the same question over here, how those beds are funded. Again, the same 24, how they're funded. If you've got any block beds that are paid for when they're empty, you will treat those as occupied here because you're getting the revenue for them. The next question here is April 22, asking exactly the same data. I'm not going to go through it, but you'll see here, I've now got all 35 beds for sale. None of those are taken out because here I've no longer got staff sleeping in, for example. That's why they'll all be available. How long have I got left? Is it because it's just said it's got 5 minutes left? Is it? I thought it was an hour and a half.
We scheduled it for an hour, according to the invitation. But Renna, was it the email for an hour and a half?
It was an hour.
An hour, okay. So if
Well, hopefully providers can stay on.
Yeah.
I'll just keep going. And if people have to drop off, do make a note. The meeting's in the link. You'll be able to get another session here, and you are.
We've got the recording as well. Yeah.
The next one is staffing units. If you have got up to 6 units, you can provide your information at a unit level. If you've only got 1 unit, or you can only provide data at home level, you'll select 1 unit. I'm choosing to do this at 2 units, and here you'll see I've got unit 1 and I've got unit 2 below. Okay, unit 1 says, and we're now looking at April 22 data. So from this point onwards, it's April 22. Okay, it's asking me what is my staffing ratios on April 22. So take a week, an average week in April 22, put your staffing ratios in there. Based on the information you put in the next section, it will give you your average hours per relevant resident week here. The next section asks you what your occupancy was in April 22. So take an average day or an average week or the end of the month, the last day, whatever you want to do, take a day and say, what was my occupancy on those days? I had 3 residential residents, I had 5 resi with dementia, 9 nursing and 9 nursing dementia. That will also then just give you some average hour breakdowns over here. I'm not going to go through unit 2 because it's exactly the same, but what it does do then is just give you a little summary at the bottom, which you'll see on the summary tab. The next section is your direct staffing cost, also for April 22. So this asks you for your national insurance. So I would say here, run your payroll file, look at what your monthly percentage of employers' national insurance was compared to your annual payroll file, put in the percentage there. What is your employee pension contribution? Again, you'll get that from your April payroll file. And if you're an apprenticeship levy funder, you've got pay over 3 million, you'll need to put in 0.5% there. Okay, what I will do is just delete these here. So what you'll see here on the next section, so that calculates your on cost at 15.5%, your cover cost, and again, you've got little question marks here, basing this on a 5-day week for a full-time equivalent. What is your holiday entitlement? The statutory minimum for holiday is 28 days a year. That's 20 days holiday and 8 days bank holiday. That equates to 5.6 weeks a year and 12.7% of total pay cost. You're paying staff 5.6 weeks a year where they're not actually working, but you're paying them. You'll pop in your training and supervision. So based on a 5-day working week, what's your average number of training days per year? It'll be anywhere between 4 and 10. The number we see most commonly is 5. Sick, we know, is between 9 and 10 days, currently per annum according to Skills for Care. So I'm going to put that in a 9.5 because that might be the average. Lots of little helpful boxes. Maternity, paternity, adoption pay and suspension pay, very low numbers, but it might be 0.5%. Oops, sorry, 0.5. And again, 0.5 over here. If there's any others, you can populate those down here. That tells me that we've got 8.7 weeks a year that we pay our staff where they're not actually working. That's 43.5 days. And it's an on cost of 20.9% that we need to add on. Okay, those percentages will now be applied down below. We're asking you here, again, you've got little helpful buttons. As of April 22, how much do you pay your nurses per hour? What do you pay your associates per hour, senior carers and carers per hour? It will then add on the on costs and the cover costs and give you a blended hourly rate for each of those care types. The next section is your agency costs. What are you paying your agency nurses? So you may be paying the agency nurse £30 an hour. You pay £6 margin to the agency provider and £4 VAT. If you're not recovering the VAT, you need to make sure you recover that in here. So you're going to say it's £40 an hour for your nurse, 30 for your nursing assistant, etc., etc. And then we ask you the last question in this section, for the last 3 months prior to April 22, so that's all of February, all of March, all of April, how many nurse hours did you have? How many nurse assistant hours did you have? How many senior carers? How many carer agency hours? Okay, what was that? Divide it by 12, and that will give you your average weekly agency hours. Okay, all of that data multiplied together will tell you by staffing grade what your blended hourly rate is. Now we can tell you here that your average rate for a nurse is 26.53p. If you were providing one-to-one with a nurse, that's what you'd be charging for it. If you were charging one-to-one for a carer, £15.89 is what you would be charging for a carer. That is the last section of data you need to populate. What that does do is gives you a nice summary over here. And you can look at this in two ways. You can look at it for 21-22 data, or you can look at it for April 22 when you gave us the uplifts on the expenditure tab before. I'm going to stick with April 22 because that's the best illustration of now. This will total up all of the staffing costs and will give you a total of what the staffing costs are per annum. Bear in mind, mine is all made up data, so you won't recognise a lot of these numbers. It will total up your care home premises costs and give you a total per week. This will be the same for all of them because it's divided across all residents. These will be different rates based on resi dementia, nursing dementia. All of your food, supplies and services costs will be an equal number across all resident types. Likewise, for your central overhead costs will be equal. It will give you a subtotal. It will then tell you what your return on operations and what your return on capital calculations are to then give you a total cost for your residential, resi dementia, nursing and nursing dementia are. So that then should be the number you identify with and recognise as being what it costs you on average to provide care to each of the resident types below. There's a couple of little boxes down here which help you to validate some numbers that you might want to recognise. I'm not going to go through those, but they're there for you to peruse if that's helpful. Once you have completed that, there's a little note section if there's anything else you need to tell us. There's also an audit trail if you've got colleagues or if you're giving this access to your accountant to do, you can see what the accountant has done. The very last one, which if I go back to the dashboard here, oops, sorry, what you should do then, very important, is click save. It will save every time you change tabs, but once you click save, it will save your response. You can then submit that to the local authority if you wanted to. Once you've submitted it, they will look at it. And if they've got any queries, they'll come back to you in queries. And you can come over here to the query section. And you can open up the file again in the query section. And if you go to the notes section, you'll see what the queries are. Okay, they're querying the carers here. If I go to that field, it will show me here. There's a little green box around it. They're querying that number. And they're giving me a little question down here. And I can send them an answer to that question, add the comment. And submit it again if I want to by clicking submit, save and resubmitting to the local authority. I know that's a lot to take in, but I can answer any questions if people would like to talk things through at this moment in time. Now, for some reason, I've lost the ability to stop sharing my screen. I don't know where that's gone. Oh, here we go. It's come back. So there you go. So I'll hand back over to you, Bradford, to field any questions that may have come up in the chat.
Thanks, Richard. We've had a few providers drop off the call, but as I say, we're still recording the session. We will get it out. So really, an opportunity for any of the providers to put forward any questions in terms of the iEasy platform. And appreciate there is some contention around the very tight timescales on this. Is there anything anybody wanted to ask?
Yes, I'd like to thank Richard. I'm not being negative. It's just a mindset. Given the time scale, this wouldn't be a problem were we not being pushed into a corner. We could have much more seminars and we could break it down into language we understood. As it is, I will hire my accountant. We will sit together. It will cost me more than the 250 quid the council are throwing out, but I want it to succeed. And my anger is that this would be so much more successful if we weren't pushed into this corner where people are just blanketing and shutting down.
I hear you. I hear you. I'm not a big advocate for funding by the local authority because it takes money away from paying uplifts. But I understand if you need to recruit an accountant to do this, then absolutely that's fair and only right to do so. We will offer you as much support as you need. John at ARC is fantastic at giving support and guidance. I'm sure his details will be provided to you. We will do everything we can do. We will make ourselves available. And I'm sure some of the councils and some of the third parties are offering to do some one-to-one sessions if people are particularly challenged, because we all recognise how important it is to participate. We've actually we've got the Minister Gillian Keegan is talking to us on the 21st, and she's asked for some people to be put forward. And unfortunately, you're not a caring member of ours. I'd like to put you forward because I think what you've got to say is incredibly helpful for the Minister. And I would like to reference your comments through to the Minister, if that's okay, because she's exactly coming to talk to people like yourself who are not able to easily participate to understand why. So I would like.
I she'll already know me.
Yeah, I think it's important that we get the voices heard in that respect, because
again, to go right back to the beginning, the number of emails coming out has been confusing, and we actually within Bradford don't actually know whether most of the emails that the council or anybody else sends out actually arrive at the destination and or to the person that we need to be communicating with. And that's something that not just this exercise, but every exercise we undertake, we have never clearly phoned every care home. My care home was phoned this week about this exercise, and the administrator said, I have no idea what you're talking about. So the council officer quite willingly sent them an email, and they still have no idea for it, because they weren't speaking to me. They were speaking to the manager or the admin at the home. So we have no database for who we need to speak to.
Okay, well, in respect of care homes, and I think just going back a step, it's been a curveball for myself in terms of the liaison and the communications plan. Ideally, I would have liked to have had a better lead into this. And the contract officers for home support have also carried out the ring round, and I think it's trying to establish who the key contact is within each organisation, and then trying to present the information. So I mean, in terms of that, your point there, it's crucial, because we don't want the information to land with somebody who feels that, hang on a minute, I don't know what to do with this, and or it might sit in a place where it's going to take several weeks for it to be, or a week or several weeks for it to be addressed. So I think that's important, and we have compiled a list of those homes that we've contacted, but and also there's comments in there. So I will liaise with Paul and Kerry on that.
Well, my example will be, you will have a tick against contacted that care home.
Yeah.
Spoke to Anne.
Yeah.
But that will be it. That's as far as it'll go.
Yeah, I absolutely get what you're saying. It's about that. It's about understanding who the
it's the question that you ask when you get hold of somebody in the home. Yeah.
Sorry.
And the other biggest one that I think is the turn off is that we have, in particular in Bradford, we've undergone cost of care exercises 4 times over the last 5 years to no avail whatsoever, because local authorities are constrained by the amount of money that they have. We all understand that, but it does make a mockery of a cost of care exercise, where then by you have one pie of money, it's divvied, and that's your lot. And we will ignore all that everybody did. And I think that's been a big turn off to a lot of care home providers, that what's the point?
Yeah, I think it's that earlier point that Richard was highlighting, in terms of we're not trying to bridge that gap, so that by the October 23, we're not facing that shortfall and that lack of understanding in terms of what needs to be funded via the local authority. In terms of the prior exercises, I think it's very difficult because of the budget constraints, and then being faced with a position where you've got that gap, and you're trying to bridge it, but you've got to ensure that it's equitable, and you're paying a rate that is the best rate that you can afford. I'm not sure what much I could add to that. It's
no, I understand it, and if the politics get it wrong this week and Rishi Sunak don't get elected, then the NI contribution goes AWOL and social care gets left again.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Louise, I think you had something to say, didn't you?
Yeah, I just obviously there's a number of points, David. You know, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. It is a nightmare. It has been a very short time frame for providers to engage. It is difficult. Not all providers are whizzes with accounts, and we can't all do, you know, have degrees like Mike doesn't have expertise who has been through this process and done it for himself. It is difficult, and I completely get that, but it's necessary. And what I would say is, go on to it and just fill out what you can do. Don't get stuck or bogged down with what you can't. Actually, you'll be surprised at the amount you can do. Start off with that. You know, you can fill in those staffing hours, you can fill in those pay rates. That's a start. There'll be certain things that you can fill in. Get started with that. Then where you get to those, so I'm not sure on this, I'm not quite sure on that, we'll focus on some discussions around return on capital and return on operations. But look at your previous accounts. If you were happy with where you were and you take into account the different things, just make sure those numbers correlate and they make sense to what you'd expect to hopefully come out with this next year. Also recognise not everybody's got their accounts done up until March 22, also a massive issue. But do what you can. Look at alternative data sources, speak with ARC. We know there might be some delays, we know it's holidays. It is a tight timescale, but that doesn't mean to say if we're just waiting on certain bits of data, it can't be, we can't work around that. As well, it's a useful management tool as well in the first instance, because as you said, David, a lot of us just carry on and you just hand your books over to the accountant and they do it at the end of the year. But actually, given where we're at with the costs that are inflating, we really could do with having a closer eye on where we're at. So it's a useful tool to do as yourself now and say, right, where am I at? Where am I spending? Where can I save costs, or what is happening and how am I performing? So it's a good opportunity to have a look at that as well. And the other thing for me that's really key is the more providers that respond to this, the more that get involved from a local point of view, this will give us anonymised data that we can use as a baseline that will obviously set fee rates going forward, but also now, because I think it's really key that we ask for an uplift this year. We need an uplift, in-year uplift, whether that's funded via an ICS as they did last year with the national living wage increase slightly earlier. But I want to use this data, the anonymised data that comes out of this in August and September, to go to the ICS, to go to the local authority, to go to everybody and highlight the pressures and how much we need an in-year uplift if we want to actually survive through to next April. So for so many reasons, it can be used here and now as well as for this. So please just do what you can and start with what you do know and then work from there.
I had a very wise boss one day and he asked me, Mr. Crabtree, I'm asking, and I choose my words very carefully, will you attempt to fill the forms in? And I said, of course I'll attempt. Good. Then you'll tell me why you can't do it. And I said, yes, but at least we have to attempt.
Were there any other questions that came into the chat that you need answering?
In terms of tech support, if providers are struggling with the registration aspect of it, is there, I noticed a help and contact tab on the website.
The link I put in, the very first link I put in at the top of that, and you probably said, it'd be helpful if you send these links out afterwards in an email. But the link I've sent out there to support and guidance, there is, if you've got technical support for registration, there is an email address on there that you can email at CareCubed and they will sort out any technical elements for you.
Brilliant. James,
I can attest to that as well. I working in another area, we're using the iEasy platform. They are very quick to respond as well. You know, the team. So and the other thing I'd make a plea is that there is a lot of help and support. There is a lot of things that are on the website, a lot of guidance. There's those drop-in sessions. So there are things that are there. You know, it is, you know, we appreciate an hour and a little bit is a, you know, a short amount of time to give someone a whistle stop tour or something like this. There are things that can be used sort of at your sort of at your own pace to take it through. And the other thing I would just say is precisely, I'd echo what Louise said. There are some things that are very obvious. It's the entry point for this is always the most difficult thing. It looks really amorphous. It looks big. It's like, how do I do it? If you start with the things that you know and then use some of the support materials that are available through the iEasy platform to say, right, these are the areas that I'm unsure, there will be answers there. But I've put our email address in there as well to say, please do reach out to us. And I know that, we'll work with Louise about, sort of common issues, and potential drop-in sessions, and actually use some of your sort of peers in the market who've done this as well to offer some support and guidance. I think there's a range of things that we can do.
Thank you, John. Okay. Just a couple of comments I'm noticing. So James was asking in terms of any BCA catch-up sessions and support, and then Louise come back. All the information will be going on the provider zone. So it will summarise all the information.
Yeah. The only thing I wanted to say, Raminder, about that is I'm just thinking, certainly from my point of view, like if we're going to try and undo this, but a lot of the terminology, like I think it's been raised a couple of times, like will make immediate sense to accountants. And I'm just thinking, would it be useful to have just a quick BCA catch up, just so that as managers, we can go, that's what that means. That's what that means. That's what that means, because we all know our own individual ways of describing different pots of money and stuff. So I just think it'd be useful just as managers to be able to go, that's what it means, or this is what I used for that, etc.
Yeah, Louise just replied in the chat, James, that there's the Tuesday sessions that take place around, I think, 10:30 on a morning, 10:30, yeah, and can arrange a weekly drop-in as well with the Bradford Care Association.
Obviously, they're weekly meetings that are already in place, Jeb, so we'll just continue that and make sure we focus on that. And I can ask Mike, who BCA board member, who has already completed this for 3 homes and has a full accounting background, so he will be able to attend and support with some of those conversations as well. And like you say, the terminology and such.
Yeah, that'd be real cool.
Fantastic. Excellent, thank you. So apologies, as the invitation was for an hour, we have ran over. Thank you for sticking with us, those that have stayed on the call. Is there anything, just before we do wrap up, any comments to be shared, or is everybody happy to draw it to a close there?
I'm just asking to stay on afterwards for a minute, just wrap up ourselves, if that's okay. John and Louise, if we can stay on, is that okay?
Yes, yeah, that'd be great, Richard. Okay, I've given it a few seconds. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for attending, and we will get an email with the video that'll be going on YouTube, and the links that have been provided in today's chat, and as part of any other key information that will be included in that email communication to providers as well. Hopefully, we can get that out to you tomorrow morning.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Will you stop recording, Raminder?
Yeah. Ren, are you okay to stop the recording, please? Still recording.
Rena's still muted as well, isn't she?
Sorry, I just cut out. I don't know what you said. Sorry, I just cut out.
Oh, you okay to stop recording, please?
Yeah, of course. Sorry.
You've still got some people in the chat. Is that everybody?
It's Lou from my team, okay, and also Rena from the same team.
Cool. Okay.
The contracts and quality team.
I think we stopped recording now, haven't we?
No, I think it's still recording, Rena.
Still ticking.
And it looks like it's stopped from my perspective. I can't see the count.
No, mine's ticking away. What I suggest is if we drop off and rejoin, or I'll give you a call.
If you just drop off, we can drop off and rejoin the same link.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, all right, I'll do it. Okay.